Cages can be used to protect others from harm or induce harm on its captives. However, bars aren't always the item blocking in the captured. Society's restrictions and the world's expectations can form shackles on your life and imprison you.
They put me in here.
However, a caged bird would much rather fly. Women's sexuality had always been controlled by man, until the 20th century broke them out of this mold. In 1960, the sexual revolution began, as women realized they could use their sexuality to their advantage and gain more freedom. With this movement came reactions, reform, and most importantly, revolution. So, the real question is, when is it appropriate to use sexuality to gain more freedom? The answer? Women should use their sexuality to gain freedom of choice only if they are ready to face potentially negative reactions. However, before one can discuss the 1960s sexual revolution, one must know about the history of women's sexuality. Up until the 19th century, society saw women as pure creatures of virginal morals. Sex was only brought into account when a woman was married, and even then the act of sex was not for pleasure. Men decided when to instigate sex and never asked the woman what their opinion on the situation was. That is until the free love movement started in the 19th century, more specifically the 1870s. Throughout this movement, free lovers opposed prostitution, criticized male sexual dominance in marriage, and envisioned a society in which women would have greater equality with men. The main point of the free love movement tried to accentuate was the fact that a woman's sexual activity was her own choice. However, sex did not become socially popular until after World War I. The relationship between men and women started to shift. Men had been marching off to war, not sure if they would ever live to see another day. Women were mostly awestruck by these heroic figures, and as the lost generation started, society started to rule their young lives less and less. With this change came the Roaring Twenties, and sex was no longer a thing for modern girls to blush and giggle about. Now, with women's history leading up to the 1960s, it was no wonder the women of America finally decided it was time for change. This is when the real revolution began. The 1960s brought a new image of how a perfect woman should act. As Betty Friedan recalls, a woman was expected to be young and frivolous, almost childlike, fluffy and feminine, passive, gaily content in a world of bedroom and kitchen, sex, babies, and home. Society had once again pushed women into the corner of a man's world. However, all of that was about to change. Women decided it was time for them to have a choice on what path they took in life. One of the first steps they took was to assert themselves in the workplace. While women's involvement in the workforce increased during World War II, the 1960s brought a new sense of careers for women. Offices were starting to allow women to work as secretaries in their buildings. While most men saw this as an opportunity for eye candy, women saw it as their chance to gain more choices in life. As Stacy C., a woman interviewed by Paula Kamen, recalls, in the past, women and men kind of traded off. Well, I'll give you sex if you give us the money to go to the beauty salon on Saturday. What's up with that? Now that women had enough money from their new jobs to support themselves, they didn't need men to take care of them like society liked to think. In fact, their new positions and jobs allowed them to start relationships and end them just as easily. As long as women were part of the business world, they were able to assert more dominance in their sexual lives, thus giving them more choices in the world. For the people possessing the most power in society also enjoy the greatest sexual permissiveness.
I need my own office. It's hard to do business and be credible when I'm sharing with a Xerox machine. Freddie Rumson's office has been vacant for some time. I think I should have it.
It's yours.
Really?
You young women are very aggressive.
Oh, I didn't mean to be impolite.
No, it's cute. There are 30 men out there who didn't have the balls to ask me.
Soon the media started to pick up on the changes women were making. Time magazine was one of the first media sources to coin the movement with the name sexual revolution. As women decided they wanted more dominance in their sexual lives, female writers supporting the movement started to come out with books about how a woman should go about these new changes. One such writer was Helen Gurley Brown, author of Sex and the Single Girl. As Brown wrote, perhaps you will reconsider the idea that sex without marriage is dirty. You inherited productivity for it. It isn't some random piece of mischief you dreamed up because you're a bad, wicked girl. With these changes came more information readily available to women about sex and how it could affect their body. This allowed them to make a more educated choice before they went into a sexual encounter. It also made them aware of the risks they were taking when it came to pregnancy. Luckily for them, a new form of birth control had been released in 1960, called the pill.
I'm going to write you a prescription for Enovid. They're $11 a month, but don't think you have to go out and become the town pump just to get your money's worth.
The pill was the first major reform to come out of the sexual revolution. Since so many women were becoming sexually active before marriage and did not desire children, a new form of birth control came along in 1960.
It's probably the most revolutionary development of the 20th century. I don't think that's hyperbole, because it changed the lives of half the population.
The female half?
The female half.
It most definitely gave women a vast amount of power when it came to choices. As Margaret Sanger, the mother of the pill and founder of Planned Parenthood, says, no woman can call herself free who does not own and control her own body. So, the pill began its development under a team of Massachusetts researchers. The original pill was released May 10, 1960, produced by J.D. Searle and called Enovid. However, the original pill was far from perfect, and there were some extreme cases where the birth control was causing blood clots, heart disease, depression, and strokes. So, even though, as Anne-Marie Cunningham states, by the end of the decade, nearly 10 million women were taking the pill, a court case was put into action. And a lack of warning the pharmaceutical companies were giving about the side effects of the birth control. Though the popularity dropped after the court cases were through, which required a warning pamphlet to go out with the pill, it still gave women a vital choice when it came to their body. However, even though the sexual revolution was a time of great change for women, it was still met with many negative reactions.
Woman acts as if she has a mind of her own. She refuses my advances. This goes straight to the sanctity of a man's most fundamental right.
All our wives are giving us trouble.
I'm not talking about my wife. I'm talking about my mistress.
Through all the revolution and reform of the sexual revolution, there were still many people who did not support the movement, whether it be men or women. Some women even saw the sexual revolution as a loss of power. As Paula Kamen says, in the past, not having sex before marriage merited a big reward, being supported for life by a man. But after the sexual revolution, when sex was given freely, it became a less precious commodity.
The fact is, even in our modern times, easy women don't find husbands.
Along with this, many women saw this new sexual lifestyle as degrading. Men were starting to take advantage of their bodies. Not to mention, many churches were not necessarily supportive of this movement.
His position on sex before marriage is that abstinence is always the best solution, that marriage is an institution and sex is a part of that union.
Not only this, but many people connected the sexual revolution with increase of divorce, unwanted pregnancy, sexually transmitted diseases, and increase in rape. The sexual revolution brought a new generation of women with choices. They could choose how to present their sexuality, where they wanted to work, and whether or not they wanted children. This was a revolutionary time for women, but there were still those who did not support the movement. However, these negative reactions were handled with grace and the movement flourished. Women managed to break out of the restrictive cage that was holding them back. No longer were they the poor little animal trapped in a prison. but fierce women who could control their own lives. The shackles had been broken and there was no going back to their old ways. They used sexuality to break out of the restrictive molds and handled the negative reactions with diligence and care. And in the end, they truly came out as free as a bird.